Focus. Hello my friends, this is a review on the Survival Knives GSO 4.7. This is a hard use compact survival knife, so that means something you'd probably have supported by another system, but worst case scenario probably could get all your jobs done. It's on the smaller side, so this isn't a RTAC 2. I'll do some size comparisons later, but yeah, the philosophy behind these knives is something that's actually carryable, frequently. So you're never going to be like, it's too heavy to bring that. And something that should get you through most tough spots. Now, Survive knives are sort of from what I can tell, and I don't know much about the company, they're like a small batch company. They seem to do runs of knives. All their knives are GSO something, which I think stands for Guy Seaford Ordnance. Him being the Guy Seaford being the guy who runs the company. And they seem to do various lengths and steels and combinations of designs over the year, and you kind of get on a wait list for one, whatever they announce they're making, and eventually you get it. These are pretty, in my opinion, competitively priced. So these are going to cost, in terms of competition, these are going to be Bark River, LT Wright, ballpark of price. So this is a 3V GSO 4.7, and this cost the original owner $198 US. So about 240 Australian, probably about 280 Australian by the time you get it here. To me, with the materials and after they've done my testing and reviewing, I think that's a pretty good deal. This is one of the finer sort of compact survival knives I've had and tested. So I'll go into this review. I've done a fairly extensive testing on it. So this review will contain the standard sort of survival type use, the woodworking use, some other uses. It's going to talk a lot about the steel. So what I've done is I've sharpened the steel 3 different ways, done my edge tests with it, and then I've resharpened the steel using a field solution and seeing how that goes, and speaking a bit about the difference between why you might want a lower end steel or a pretty modern powder steel like 3V in your survival knife. This should be a good review. I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. Let's get down to brass tacks. Tabletop first, size comparisons, specs and whatnot. Okay, so this is a 4.7 inch blade, hence the term GSO 4.7. The blade is made of CPM 3V steel with a Peters heat treat. That is what PHT stands for on the back. I do believe Guy has changed his heat treat up either since or to this. There is a differentiation between the 3V Survive knives, that's for sure. It's an American made knife, and what I understand is the owner has a fair amount of input into the condition these leave the factory floor in. So there's some issues with getting an availability of Survive knives, and that is being attributed largely to the perfectionism of the owner. I'm not sure how much of this is kind of like knife industry lore and things that make the owners who do have them feel more pride or whatever, but that's kind of what they say. So what you get here is you've got a little choil here for sharpening. You've got a saber grind, so it is flat here, so the stock thickness here, and then down to from this point on down to the edge with a separate flat grind. The edge is relatively thin behind, so compared to say a knife that may initially look a bit similar is like a Becker BK2. Compared to a Becker BK2, this was going to slice and sort of bite into materials a lot better. It's got a grind that makes it so it isn't super bulky behind this edge here, not super thin, and the factory edge was still broad and didn't last very long, but I'll get to that. But the grinds are sort of more versatile, not only for being a wedge. So cool, I like the way they've done that. The blade is a very basic drop point style shape, almost that symmetry that would almost be a spear point, but the thickness of this spine here generally steers me away from labeling it as such. But hey, labels are like heavy metal sometimes, isn't it? The amount of different things you call the same type of music is crazy. The spine has a whole bunch of jimping here. It's like the squared off, pretty basic jimping. It does bite your thumb. Well, not. It takes your thumb. It takes hold of your thumb, but it doesn't, eat into your thumb when you're doing your wood processing tasks and that sort of thing. The blades, it's not coated. It is like a finish on the steel. I think it's like a bead blast. It's not particularly durable. The points where the knife gets used does sort of shine out fairly rapidly. I'll see if I can hold up a shot of when I first got it as to, obviously looking at it now. This stuff, I could get this off, but the rest of it sort of does become a little bit on the shiny side. So there you go. Overall though, it's about what I would hope for from a knife that's trying to be a bit of a hybrid tool. So say you've got something like the Gerber Strong Arm or the SRK. These are generally a bit more wedge-like. So kind of the same purpose, sort of, but a little bit less sort of precision involved in them. So the edge behind these is quite thick. You can feel it with a finger pinch. These two, comparatively to this Survive knife, it does have a little bit less there, which is great. However, the 3V still allows there to be less there without having to worry about, is it going to roll over during hard use? So yeah, you got 420HC, you got VG1 here. These are pretty similar-ish stainless steels. 3V is not a stainless steel. It's probably about the same level of toughness and ductility as these two though, with the added benefit of having good edge retention. And yeah, the ability that granted by using a higher end steel does allow them to do a bit more of an ambitious grind. So there you go. In terms of its thickness, it's about on the SRK level of thickness. So it is a fairly robust survival knife, and definitely not something for slicing tomatoes with. As okay as it would do as that, it's just not in the knife's spec. So there you go. The blade I'm really happy with. I think it's a really excellent performer. The spine and the first flat gives the blade a lot of rigidity, so you can batten through the wood. Cue obviously a montage of me battening excessively and my hard Australian nasty wood. There was no issues with it whatsoever. Really fine knife. Obviously I'm not able to do the really big stuff that is maybe going to start twisting and bending the blade, but then nor should you be. If you choose to travel with a knife like this, you're probably going to be backing it up with a larger, heavier cutting tool and maybe a saw. So, I mean, as I said, you would be able to make work with this if this was all you had, but again, it's not an RTAC 2 where you can put like a whole log in between this blade and hit the tip down. Just different strokes for different folks, different grinds for different kinds, all of that good stuff, if you know what I mean. So yeah, the blade is about perfect for what I would want from a knife of this purpose. These little survival knives may not be for you. You might be an RTAC 2 guy, and that's totally cool. This is my bag. This is my type of, if I want to have a knife that I have in my head as my potential survival knife, I want it to be usable in camp chores as well. And I want it to be not such a pain in the bum to carry. And this blade, this thickness, this general combination it suits me. Moving on to the handle. The handle is micarta. It's a slab style handle. It's a rougher micarta, so it's got a fair bit of texture, a fair bit of scratch to it, if you know what I'm saying. It's not smooth, it's not like polished. Say, look at this Bark River Kefard here. This is like almost a polished micarta. There's almost a certain shine to it. It's kind of the opposite to that. It's got some grip to it. Even other GSOs that I have. So this is the 4, which this isn't mine. This is on loan from a friend. This is the 4. This has a smoother micarta finish. Just for size reference there, that's the 4 versus the 4.7. You'll notice, funnily enough, a difference of about 0.7 of an inch in terms of blade thickness. A bit more of a square or rectangular handle in that as well. Anyway, I digress. Do some size comparisons in a minute. The handle is about perfect. It's about what I like. It's got the awareness that it's going to be used a bit more roughly, so it does have this extra little bit of guard here that will stop your hand from, getting too crazily out of place. Whereas when you have something that's a little bit more light use, it's less of an issue. It just is more of a guide rather than a stop. That's the Survive GSO 3.5, also on loan from my buddy. So yeah, it's got that awareness that, yep, you're going to have to flange that out just a little bit more. But yeah, it's got a very ergonomic shape. I couldn't see too many hands that would have an issue with this. Nice and wide as well, so I like a knife to really fill out this center point of my hand, and this one really does. It's got a lot going for it. It's got enough of a flare at the back to be able to grab onto. This isn't a chopping knife. So chopping with this blade, it can be done. You'll be able to halve a stick if you have absolutely nothing else around to halve the stick with, and if it's too hard to just stamp in half, you'll be able to get it started and get a weak point in there and chop. But yeah, not ideal, but there is enough there, and combined with this sort of internal lanyard here, which is where you sort of thread the rope underneath, combined with that, you'll be able to do some light chopping I mean, geez, if you really want to. But overall, the handle's a real win. I really enjoy the feel of it in hand. I like the extra roughness, given that it is a bit more of a rugged use knife, and it really does kick a lot of goals. It's a good combination. One thing I forgot to say about the blade, you can definitely strike a fire still on it as well. I've probably already given that away with some footage that I've played, but it's sharp enough. The coating isn't such that binds up any corners or sharpness on this. So as I said, it's just a rough bead blast. So they haven't. So I shouldn't have called it a coating really, but the finish hasn't rounded anything off. Often bead blasting or tumbling does round off your edges, and they haven't done that with this one. So that's really cool. The sheath for this knife is a Kydex style sheath that has a dangler option, which I currently have attached. It's a comfortable Kydex fit. Very basic. You can mount it sort of a bit higher or a bit lower. There's options. Comes with a leather loop like this, and then the dangler is obviously a separate piece of leather that you can clip onto your belt without having to take your belt off. Very happy with the sheath. It's not the snuggest sheath in the world. There is a little bit of rattle in there. So if you are sneaking up on people and rattle is an issue, I'm dare say that your big stupid human body will be making more unless you're like Solid Snake, your big stupid human body is going to be making more noise than your sheath rattle anyway, creeping through the jungle. So it's not the worst, it's just there. It's just one of those things you feel like you have to talk about when you're weighing up the goodness or the badness of a sheath. But it's a comfortable Kydex sheath. It's got a drainage point. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. It's what you would expect from a knife that you're paying the $200 mark. You wouldn't want just El Cheapo nylon for $200. You want, for a knife this size, you want Kydex, you get Kydex. It's a win, no worries at all. So with regard to this 3V steel, 3V steel is a very good steel. It's probably one of the best outdoor, outdoor hard use steels you can get. It holds an edge about as long as the sort of pocket knife powder stainless steels. So in my testing, I can get it to about the same performance level as S30 or S35 VN in terms of edge holding. That's just my testing versus twisted sisal rope. It's the testing I do. So naturally, I did that testing on this knife here. I started on the factory edge. On the factory edge, which was not a surprise to me, the factory edge got to 85 passes of the rope. So 85 passes isn't great in terms of if I'd have sharpened the knife with my 20-degree edge and I got 85, I'd be having some questions. But this is factory edges. Factory edges are for the people who say, hey, I got a survival knife, I'm going to go and, cut down a tree with it, or I'm going to go and split some horrible wood with it. The company doesn't want the person doing that and then having a fucked up edge straight away. So they put these broader edges on them because A, they're easier to do, they require less precision, just less time on the factory floor, and B, it is sort of almost idiot proof. Not that you're an idiot if you do that sort of stuff, you do what you want with your knives, live your dreams, but it's destruction proof, I guess. They don't want those first bad stories. They want you to be able to say, hey, if your edge rolled, it's because you thinned it out. We gave it to you good. 85 passes, mind you, on wood is, probably going to translate to a lot of feather sticking steel. But against rope, yeah, it's not amazing. It's fine. The real goodness of this came out when I did reduce it down to a 20-degree edge. And the interesting thing was, with both a work sharp edge and with a Lansky edge, so my Lansky angled system. So work sharp, I got to about 195, and with my Lansky, my V edge, got a little bit better to like 207. So didn't get that huge acceleration I often get when I do put my Lansky edges on things, but it's still cut for ages and still cut how I'd like. Whether that was just me sharpening that day or whether or not this steel does just carry a convex edge really well, and maybe a sort of finer V-grind edge a little bit less good. It was interesting anyway, but those were the numbers I got. I was open to whatever happening, and that's what happened. So there you go. So yeah, excellent steel. But yeah, here's a little clip that I'll sort of just run in its entirety, I guess. I'll speed it up, just about sharpening. Alright, so the knife is now not particularly sharp. I've used it and dulled the edge just through the review process. The goal of this next point is to get this 3V steel back to paper slicing sharp, just using something you'd probably have in the field. So this is just a little DC3 fork and even stone, which is probably, you know, a fair few amount of people's only sharpening kit that they might take out, if at all. So little diamond and ceramic sharpener. We're just going to put a serviceable edge back on this knife and then see if we can get the paper slicing. This would be a lot easier to do on, say, something like the Gerber strong arm, for example. And this is a bit of a point of debate in survival knife, you know, circles. Is it better to just have something you can resharpen really easily? And how hard is this advanced steel actually to field sharpen? So let's see. It's not the best, it's a micro bevel, but definitely more serviceable than it was. When you get back to your shed or whatever, once you're done, then you can go and put your, you know, degreed angle on it again, but you can field sharpen and field surface 3V, well, this 3V, with a really small little stone. It's not going to be that crazy good edge, but you'll be able to get it slicing paper once again, which is probably comparable to, you know, doing really nice thin feathers versus the rougher ones. So definitely doable, but not as easy as with a 1095 or a 5160 or a 420 HC blade for sure. So just something that you're going to have to weigh up, I guess, in terms of, do you have the patience to do this for a little bit longer? If you do muck it up, you kind of often have to start again. But yeah, little DC3 stone, chuck it in your packet, in your back pocket, or if you've got a mountable sheath, it'll keep your knife maintained for the duration, that's for sure. So there you go. I hope that's, you know, some good food for thought about having this kind of steel in a knife and what it might mean for you in a survival situation. So let's do some size comparisons. So this is next to a Gerber strong arm. Now, in my opinion, the Gerber strong arm is probably a little bit more tactical oriented than this knife, but you could definitely use them both as a compact survival knife just fine. Going to be easier to sharpen steel, that's going to go duller quicker, probably going to be a bit softer and maybe roll out a little bit easier as well. The handle on the Survive is a bit more comfortable than the handle on the strong arm, which can be a little bit thin for some grips, just given these channeling out here. Both are about as thick as each other. Looking next to a completely different spec knife, this is my Mora Companion. This is my Mora. I've got two Moras. One's really, really sharp by a buddy of mine, and the other's just my standard beta. This is my standard beta. At any rate, well, next to the Mora you see, probably you realise this isn't a huge knife. But then when you look at perhaps the spine thickness, you do realise it is quite a bit more robustly built. So there you go. It's Mora Companion, standard military green, not the heavy duty, just the standard. Obviously, Mora is a Scandi ground, and this is a saber grind with that extra edge there. This Mora has the edge going straight from this line straight to the cutting point and is a bit more delicate, but will bite into wood a bit more keenly. Let's look at it next to, this is like more of a camp knife. This is my Bark River Kefart knife. This is my Kefart that I broke the tip off of and did a bit of a backyard fix on. This is a 4V steel knife, and this is thinner again. Bit of a longer blade, came with a 5-inch blade, now it's about a 4.85-inch blade, bit thinner, really tall, full convex grind. It is just great for slicing, great for woodworking, less durable for your sort of harder survival tasks. This one has a polished micarta handle. This, as I said before, was a rougher sort of standard finished micarta. Okay. Right, so let's look at next to, here's a K-Bar Mark 1 just because it's on the table. Again, a bit more of a knife akin to slightly lighter use, slicing as well. Yeah, just a general all-round camp knife with some tactical applications, I guess. Interesting knife, I like this one a lot. And let's look at it next to an R-Tac 2, which is, this is the knife. You know, some people are like, hey, it's not a survival knife unless it's huge. So the R-Tac 2 is just massive, obviously. You know, the handle is big, the blade is enormous. The blade's actually only about as thick as the Survive. It's just, you get so much more of it. And this 5160 steel is probably the toughest steel you can get, in terms of it's going to bend and spring around things. So you're going to be able to split really big things with this knife without, you know, probably without it breaking. So some folks, where you do a lot of wood splitting and a lot of, you know, large kindling breakdown from wet wood, this is going to be your survival knife. As I say, different grinds for different kinds. This is probably what I would choose to take. I might keep something like this in my bag if I wanted to have a bit of a fun time dicking around with something, but this is my more practical choice for sure. And what else? Lastly, let's just show it against, we all know how big a Swiss Army knife is. There we go. Zoom that in. So yeah, I mean, probably a decent little thing to have along. If you do have a blade like this, this still might be a bit lacking in the slicing department. Not going to be the easiest knife to slice and prepare sandwiches with, whereas your Swiss Army knife or something like your little Spyderco Delica or something is going to be a pretty welcome little addition in terms of just a thinner, lighter use blade. So there you go. Thicknesses there, some difference. So competition blades, what blades are in contrast with this, and are they better or are they worse? I think the most similar blade that I've had to this one is when my buddy Luke lent me his LT Wright Outback. The Outback is a saber ground knife. I think the blade is maybe to 5 inches, and a very, very similar overall sort of purpose. A little bit less contouring, a little smoother on the handle, a bit sort of more fancy looking, but about the same in terms of performance. That is an excellent knife. You'll pay more for the Outback, I think, than you will for this. And the Outback is a very limited run. I'm not sure if they make it all the time. There's always some form of Survive knife being made, just whether or not it's the 4.7, maybe it'll be the 5, maybe it'll be the 6, maybe it'll be the 4. It's just kind of the luck of the draw. So there's the LT Wright, what was it called? The Outback, which, yeah, probably the most similar I've had to this. There are cheaper options, like, for example, the K-Bar Becker BK10, I believe, the navy version of the Companion, kind of a similar shape and grind. It's in 1095 steel, which won't hold its edge as long, but will be very, very tough. That's something you could get for this rough template and save a bit of cash. Obviously, the Gerber Strong Arm is a bit more of a tactically themed knife. The SRKs, all those sorts of blades. But yeah, this reminds me most of the LT Wright Outback. Falcon even will sell you an S1 forest knife for about the same price, which is a little bit thinner. It's going to slice a little bit less well as well. It's a perfectly rugged and robust knife too. But I think this one might actually be in its price point probably the one that I'd recommend going with. If you're after something to just spend on that one good knife, I think looking up a Survive might be a pretty decent idea. It's just whether or not you're happy to wait and kind of do that dicking around process where you can't just have it now. I personally don't like that. I got this off my friend as more of an incidental thing. He brought some knives around to show me and I was like, you have a few Survive knives, which one would you sell to me? And he had kind of doubles of this, so I got it. Hey, that's probably why you can't get a Survive knife. There's guys out there buying doubles. But yeah, this is probably the one that I would get. I think I prefer it to the LT Wright Outback. I like its slightly more rugged and less show and shine philosophy behind it. And it just is a really excellent performer in all the tasks that I would expect this knife to perform in. So the Survive knives, GSO 4.7, I'm very happy with it. I bought this off my buddy for $270, and as it was brand new pretty much. And that is about what it would take probably to get a brand new one here. You know, it was, the main thing is I paid almost, if not the actual prices, so I didn't have to wait, so I didn't have to not get this one and get one that's in a steel that I didn't want or whatever. They make these in 20 CV or M390 I think as well, just depending. So this GSO 4 is in CPM 20 CV. Don't ask me to edge test these, they're not mine, so I'm not going to. But there you go. If you can be bothered with the weight and the rigmarole of getting one of these, I can't see how you'd be let down by it. I think it's about, is it perfect? I don't know if it's perfect, but it'll do everything you need it to do, and it'll probably exceed your expectations. Alright, so thank you for watching, my friends. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye now.